As parents of autistic children, we get judged all the time. We get judged by strangers in grocery stores or on the playground. We get judged by family members, by teachers and therapists, and it does really impact our parenting. I wanted to do a series for you of 3 videos that delves more deeply into this topic. We're going to talk about why judgment happens, why it hurts, how to respond to critics. We're going to talk about how to set boundaries and how to deal with our own fear and self-doubt. Now, I can't do that all in one video in a meaningful way, so we're going to jump into why it happens and why it hurts today, and the rest will be coming shortly. Before we jump in, if you're new here, I'm Andrea Pollack, parenting educator and coach. Now let's start with why judgment happens. And we want to do that because if we consider why it's happening, it can help us depersonalize that criticism. So it often comes from someone's inexperience or discomfort or fear when they encounter something that's outside of their experience, something like autism. In addition, in the case of a teacher, it comes from their own experience, which is much more narrow than the experience we have as our children's parents. So it is important to think about where it comes from. And it looks something like this. Why isn't your child doing XYZ? Or, are you sure that's the right way to do that? When my son was younger, we used to fly a few hours to join a large family gathering for Thanksgiving. And at the time, he just couldn't handle a Thanksgiving dinner that involved 40 people. So I would stay back in the hotel room with him while everybody else went to dinner. And my mother would say, you can't give in to him like that. He'll never learn. If he always gets his way, he'll never learn how to participate in these things. So that's a great example of her view was based on her own societal expectations and didn't take into account my son's needs. And that brings us directly into why it hurts. Well, of course, criticism hurts. But in addition, if it doesn't strike a chord in you of fear or doubt in your parenting, it doesn't hurt quite as much. So in the example of the Thanksgiving situation, I would sit back in the hotel room and worry, should I have made him go? Am I giving in to him? I mean, deep down I knew that making him suffer through a Thanksgiving dinner like that was not going to teach him anything other than I wasn't listening to his needs. A different example was one day we were out to lunch with another family and my son was eating ice cream and he at some point put his mouth directly on the ice cream instead of using the spoon. He was 4. And the other mother looks at me and says, I would never let my child do that. And I thought to myself, well, good for you. P.S. And by the way, her husband wound up in prison, her children with their own problems, so she probably should have been focused on something other than my child eating ice cream, but who's judging? Here are a few other examples of judgment that parents have shared with me, times when they've felt judged. I wonder if you've experienced any of these, and if you can share those in the comments, I'd love to hear about it and what you did. So one mom talked about they were at a social event at school and a parent said to her, oh, I see your child sitting on the sidelines. And it wasn't expressed directly as criticism, but it certainly felt that way to her. And she felt like, oh, maybe I'm not doing enough to make sure that my child is fitting in. And she talked about how it felt like a constant tug of war between what she knows is right for her child and what she thinks society expects of her as a parent. Another parent shared that her daughter's teacher told her that because mom was giving in too much at home, it was making her daughter's time at school more difficult. And the mom sat there and just nodded her head, but inside she was burning. She felt so misunderstood, and she felt that her child was misunderstood as well. She said, part of her feels like she trusts her instincts, but then when a professional raises a question like that, she starts to panic. Am I doing it wrong? I want to protect my child and give them the support they need, but what if I'm messing up? What if I'm making it harder for them in the long run? We feel torn between trusting ourselves and focusing on outside opinions because our brains are naturally wired to focus on the negative. It's called negative bias, and it's a survival mechanism. The idea being, if we focus enough on the negative, we'll protect ourselves for the future. So we pay more attention to and we dwell on threats or perceived failures than to positive experiences. So how do we counteract that? Obviously, we learn to focus on positive experiences, and that's how we build our parenting confidence. And that's the good news. Just because your brain is wired to focus on the negative doesn't mean you have to stay stuck in that mindset. You can train your brain to notice the positive decisions you make and focus on the positive outcomes to build your parenting confidence. Sound too simple? Well, it would be if you only had to do it once and then all feelings of judgment would go away. But it's a muscle that you have to build. You have to rewire and reframe and do it regularly so that you build this muscle of parenting confidence. So here are some tools I'll offer you on how to start building that muscle. First, start with a daily reflection. Some questions you can ask yourself include, what's one decision I've made recently that reflects my child's unique needs? Another, how did I see positive results from trusting myself? And another, what's one positive outcome I can focus on today? This small shift can help you override your brain's natural negativity bias and build more confident mindset. Second is just an affirmation that you can repeat. Now, I know this stuff might sound silly, but please just try it. I've worked with so many parents who have used these tools, and it over time helps them emerge from that overwhelming feeling of being judged to feeling confident and being able to shake off and shrug off other people's judgments. So the affirmation is, I've made decisions based on what works best for my child, and that's enough. Or, and, I choose to focus on the wins and not the stumbles. So I hope you'll consider starting that practice today. And then look out for our next video, in which we're going to talk about how to respond to critics. I'll give you actual words that you can say. Parents often ask me, well, what actual words would you suggest? And this is just a guideline to give you some thoughts, some prompts to practice your own words. And in the third video, we'll continue to work on how to set boundaries. We'll also offer some reflection questions and some scripts for you to follow to help you along this journey to shed some of the weight of those terrible judgments. I hope this is helpful for you. If you liked it, please press the like button below, and I'll see you in the next one.